She reached into the bag, expecting her presentation remote. Instead, her fingers landed on velvet. Her eyes froze on the small black box. It didn't belong there. It shouldn't have been there. Not on this day. Not when she was about to meet with the global head of the deal she'd been chasing for over a year. Not in the glass-walled VIP lounge where everything was curated. Her words, her appearance, her reputation. Darla glanced around. Nobody had seen her hesitate. Not yet. She kept her posture straight, her blazer crisp, her smile default. But her hand was shaking. Inside the box was my wedding ring. I knew she'd recognize the weight of it before she even opened the note. Because this wasn't a proposal. This was subtraction. And everything leading up to that moment had been designed to make sure she found it exactly there. In that bag, in that city, on the one day she thought she had full control. 16 hours earlier, while she was asleep in the guest room preparing for her trip, I had opened her tote bag using the zipper she always forgot to close fully. It was routine for her to rush and pack last minute, always telling me I wouldn't understand the pressure of real business. I slid the ring in beneath her chargers and lip balm, tucked the note under the soft flap. Then I locked the front door behind me for the last time. She didn't hear me go. By the time she was at the airport, I'd already shut off the utilities, canceled the cleaners, deleted our shared cloud accounts, and returned the keys to the landlord. I didn't leave a trace, except for what was inside her bag. The note read, "You traded honesty for ambition. I hope your deal's worth more than the life you erased." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to, because she'd know. And she'd know why. When she pulled the ring out, she stared at it like it was a mistake, as if it had wandered into her bag by accident. Like maybe it had fallen off a table and slipped in with her charger cables and breath mints. But then she saw the note. Folded, creased with intent, the ink still sharp and deliberate. I knew her well enough to picture her expression exactly. Tight lips, no blinking, that slow shift in her jaw when she was swallowing something bitter she didn't want to taste. And I knew what she'd do next. Not cry, not gasp, not run to the restroom and text me in a panic. No, she tucked the ring back into the velvet, closed the note without reading it twice, and powered on her laptop. She kept typing, because Darla was the kind of woman who didn't react when life caught fire. She pretended the room was simply warm. While she sat there playing composed executive, I was 3 states away, in a gas station parking lot with a peanut butter sandwich, a duffel bag, and 0 plans. My phone was off. I'd removed the SIM card an hour earlier and mailed it to myself just for the poetry of it. I didn't want her calling. Didn't want the sound of her voice trying to sound sorry. Because I didn't want sorry. I wanted her to sit through the most important meeting of her career while something gnawed at her insides and no one around her could see it. I wanted her to pitch her heart out knowing the man who once kissed her forehead every night had slipped out of her life like a whisper she didn't hear until it was gone. And if that sounds cruel to you, then you've never watched someone slowly unlove you with precision. You've never had dinner across from a woman who swears she's just tired, but won't put her phone down when it buzzes. You've never folded her laundry and found a receipt for 2 glasses of wine at a rooftop bar in Austin, the same weekend she told you she was in Boise. You've never heard the silence between her lies. Because the worst betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet, methodical, well-dressed. I never got her passcode. She changed it every few months for security. But she wasn't as careful as she thought. You'd be surprised what someone can gather from reflection. A hotel lobby window, a car screen, a mirror in a hallway. Over time, I started piecing together fragments, numbers, gestures, patterns. I didn't need to break into her world. I just needed to wait for the pieces to arrange themselves. Eventually, they did. And what I found wasn't one man. It was 2. One was a client from San Francisco, older, married, reckless. The other, younger, from Toronto. They met in Atlanta, twice. And there was a third set of messages, from someone saved only as V. That was the night I stopped trying to understand her. Because this wasn't about a moment of weakness or a connection she couldn't help. It was architecture. It was design. She was building a web of escape routes while still holding on to our life like a fallback plan. So I gave her what she was too cowardly to choose. Distance. A clean cut. Silence wrapped in velvet. And while she sat in a glass lounge, blinking under corporate lighting, pretending nothing happened, I let her pretend. For now. But this story's not over. Because what I didn't expect, What I couldn't have seen coming was what she'd already hidden in my bag. And when I found it 2 days later, it changed everything. I didn't check my bag for 2 days. It sounds strange, I know. You'd think that after burning your life to the ground, you'd at least unpack the ashes right away. But I didn't. I guess I didn't want to face what came next. I slept in the cab of my truck the first night, parked on a dead-end road behind an old orchard where nobody drove after sunset. The second night, I found a cheap roadside motel outside of Cheyenne, the kind of place where the vending machine only takes quarters and the walls smell faintly like bleach and regret. I laid on the mattress without sheets, fully clothed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling like it held answers I wasn't ready for. It was the third morning when I finally opened my bag. I wasn't looking for anything special. Just socks, maybe a clean shirt. But near the bottom, beneath the clothes I'd folded too neatly for a man trying to vanish, I found a small white envelope with my name on it. My first name. Not Babe. Not Lo. Just Lowell. I held it for a moment, as if it might dissolve. Her handwriting was unmistakable, clean, spaced-out letters, no flourishes. She always printed her words. Said cursive looked dishonest. Inside was a folded note. One line. No signature. If you're reading this, then I was right. No explanation. No accusations. Just a sentence heavy enough to punch the air out of the room. I sat down on the edge of the motel bed, envelope trembling in my hand, trying to decode the layers. If you're reading this, then I was right. Right about what? Right that I'd leave? Right that I couldn't take it? Right that I'd snoop, dig, unravel? Or was she right that I'd run? That maybe I wasn't strong enough to stay? It got worse. Beneath the note was a USB stick. No label. Just black plastic and silence. I plugged it into my laptop an hour later, parked outside a diner with bad coffee and even worse Wi-Fi. My palms were sweating before I even opened the folder. Inside were 5 files. 3 were audio recordings. 2 were videos. I listened to the first one with my heart clawing against my ribs. It was her voice. Calm. Steady. Businesslike. She was talking to someone named Vin. I recognized the name. She'd mentioned him once as a consultant, someone from Toronto. But the conversation wasn't professional. It was an emotional autopsy of me. I just don't feel anything when I look at him anymore, she said. Then silence. Then laughter, not hers. He still folds my clothes like I'm worth that effort. Isn't that wild? They laughed again. Then she added, but he'll never leave. He's too safe for that. He's the kind of man who walks around his own heartbreak like it's furniture. I closed the file before it ended. I didn't need to hear the rest. Because I finally understood. The ring in her bag? That wasn't the move. It was the trigger. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to disappear so she wouldn't have to explain herself. So she wouldn't be the villain. She set the scene so carefully. Left just enough breadcrumbs to lead me to the exit door and waited to see if I'd use it. And I did. But here's the thing about pushing someone into the fire. Sometimes they walk out of it different. And I was no longer interested in disappearing quietly. Because now, I didn't want closure. I wanted clarity. And that USB stick had one more video I hadn't watched yet. One that would show me a face I never expected to see again. It took me an hour to open that final file. Not because I didn't want to see what was in it, but because some part of me already knew. My hands hovered over the trackpad like I was defusing something live. I kept replaying her voice in my head from that recording with Vin. The ease with which she dissected me, not in anger but in clinical detachment. Like I was a paper diagram of a man she used to know. A specimen she'd once studied and outgrown. But this final file, it wasn't named. Just a random string of letters and numbers, like it came from a different source entirely. When I clicked on it, the screen stayed black for 2 seconds, then flared into motion. The setting was dimly lit. A hotel room. Not unusual until I realized something. I recognized the bedspread. The strange green-gold pattern on the duvet. I had stayed in that hotel with Darla before, over 2 years ago in Minneapolis, when she had a conference and asked me to tag along for a weekend. But this footage wasn't from back then. It was recent. The curtains were different now. The room had been updated. The digital clock read 3:11 a.m. She was in the shot. In a white robe, hair tied up, pacing slowly while sipping from a wine glass. Then, another figure entered the frame. Not Vin. Not a stranger. My brother. My older brother, Eli. He wasn't supposed to even live in this country anymore. He moved to Spain after his divorce. He was a ghost to most of the family. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 8 months, just the occasional forwarded email about estate stuff from our father's lawyer. Yet here he was, stepping into frame casually, barefoot, with his hands tucked into his pockets like this was just another night in their private universe. Darla walked over, whispered something too low for the microphone to catch, and leaned into him like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. And then, her voice. Clear. Sober. Weaponized. Lowell found the note by now. Eli smirked. He'll vanish. She sipped again, added with a chuckle. He always does when things get messy. That's why this works. I paused the video there. I couldn't breathe. Not out of shock. Not even out of heartbreak. But because it all made sense. Every subtle shift. Every delayed flight. Every time Darla claimed my brother had emailed to check in. Every weird avoidance of holidays together. She had been planting seeds of confusion for months, maybe years, slowly shaping a world where I would willingly walk away and she'd never need to soil her hands. And the fact that Eli, my brother, was the architect with her? That was a fracture deeper than betrayal. I closed the laptop slowly. Sat there in my truck as a semi thundered past the diner, its headlights streaking through the dirty windshield like a warning. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was still calculating. Because this wasn't just an affair. It wasn't even a string of lies. This was orchestration. A coordinated erasure of who I was and what I had built with her. And somehow, they'd recorded it. Not for leverage. Not for guilt. But because they didn't believe I'd ever see it. Because they thought I wouldn't look. But I did. And now I knew. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me forgotten. The drive to St. Louis took 13 hours. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't check in at the front desk. I didn't make a reservation. I just walked into the same hotel where that video was recorded, not to confront her, not to demand answers, but for something far simpler. I needed to see it. The room. The space where my marriage had died in secret while I was still kissing her goodnight and folding her sweaters out of habit. I knew the layout by memory. The long hallway. The corner suite. Room 1812. I pretended I was waiting for someone near the elevators, leaning casually against the wall, heart beating slow but hard like a muffled drum. Then a housekeeper came by with a cart. I nodded. She nodded back. Her badge read, May. I waited until she finished cleaning room 1814, and when she disappeared into the supply closet down the hall, I moved fast. Used the emergency keycard I'd paid for in cash from a former client who owed me a favor. Slipped into 1812 and closed the door behind me. Silence. The room had been cleaned. Reset. The bed was made tight, pillows fluffed. Fresh towels. But even with all the sterilization, the air felt thick. Not dirty, charged. Like something important had happened there, and the walls remembered. I walked slowly. I didn't touch anything. Just stood near the window, where I saw Darla in that robe in the video, glass in hand. Her mouth curled into that cold little half-smile she saved for people she underestimated. I sat on the edge of the bed. Looked at the nightstand. The clock. The glass table. Every detail exactly as I remembered. Every object both meaningless and soaked in betrayal. And then I saw it, the mistake. They'd left something behind. It wasn't dramatic. Just a receipt. Folded, slightly torn, wedged behind the dresser like someone had brushed it off with a sleeve. I pulled it out and saw the timestamp. 3:42 a.m., dated exactly one day after the video was filmed. It was for room service. 2 orders. Not hers and Eli's. One name scribbled at the bottom under guest request, Marcy Quinn. Marcy. That name meant nothing to me. Not then. But I kept that receipt. Slipped it into my wallet. Because after everything else they'd done, this was different. This wasn't some remnant of lust or ego. This felt out of place. Like someone else had been involved or watching. Back in the truck, I searched the hotel's guest registry with a digital tool Ryan had set me up with before I left Idaho. He's good with things like that. The registry showed no Marcy Quinn checked in that night. Nothing under Quinn at all. Which meant one thing. Whoever she was, she didn't use her real name. And for the first time in days, that scared me more than anything Darla or Eli had done. Because now the questions were growing faster than the answers. Who was Marcy? Why did she use that room? Why was her name handwritten on a slip that should have been electronic? And most of all, how the hell did this connect to me? I decided then I was done reacting. I wasn't going to sit in the aftermath of her schemes any longer. I was going to dig, not for justice, not even for truth, but for whatever piece of the story she forgot to bury. Because if there was another player in all this, someone who'd been close enough to leave their name behind, maybe I wasn't the only one she had tried to erase. And if that was true, then I still had time to bring the whole thing down. Quietly. From inside. The name Marcy Quinn haunted me for days. It clung to my thoughts like fog on glass. Always there, always just out of reach. It didn't match any of Darla's coworkers, friends, clients, or even aliases I could uncover. I scoured every email backup, cross-referenced phone contacts she didn't know I still had copies of, and scanned hotel logs through Ryan's gray area software, but the trail was cold. Until I took a chance. It was a long shot. I posted the name anonymously on an industry forum Darla once used. One of those business travel boards where consultants shared shortcuts and recommendations for high-tier lounges, private flights, and hush-hush perks not listed anywhere official. I pretended to be a first-time visitor to the hotel, raving about the service and casually asking if anyone knew Marcy Quinn, a woman I claimed helped me book something special there. The first replies were garbage. Spam. Bot chatter. But then, 4 hours later, a direct message popped up. She doesn't go by that name anymore. But I recognize it. You need to stop asking. That was all it said. No avatar. No handle history. The account disappeared minutes later. Deleted. I leaned back in my motel chair and stared at the screen, my throat dry. Something wasn't adding up. This wasn't just about an affair or a family betrayal. This was something bigger. More layered. I wasn't just chasing broken promises anymore. I was circling a secret someone else had spent time and money to erase. That night, unable to sleep, I drove to the airport. Not to fly, just to sit. I walked through terminals until I found a quiet lounge with large windows overlooking the tarmac. The silence there felt honest. I watched planes land and disappear, their lights blinking through fog like ghosts returning home. And that's when I saw her. Not Darla. Her. The woman from the video. She was older than I expected. Late 40s, maybe. Tall, composed, with sharp features and the kind of gaze that made people straighten their posture when she passed. She walked with a quiet authority, familiar, but not obvious. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she didn't react. But the kicker? She wasn't alone. She was walking beside Eli, my brother, laughing. Not the way Darla laughed with him, playful and smug, but tight-lipped, professional. Like they were on the same team. Like they'd done this before. She handed him something small as they sat near the windows. A flash drive. He pocketed it without a word. They weren't having an affair. They were working together. Whatever Darla was involved in, it went deeper than I had imagined. Eli wasn't just the affair partner. He was part of something. And this woman, whoever she truly was, had the kind of confidence people aren't born with. It's earned. Or bought. And suddenly it clicked. This wasn't about me. I was collateral. A test run. A disposable story they thought would end with a man quietly disappearing from his own life. But they miscalculated something crucial. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the whole truth. And the only way to get it was to go where they'd least expect me. Back to Darla. Face to face. Not as her husband, but as the one man she thought would never come back. I didn't knock. I used my old key. Darla never changed the locks. Maybe she didn't think she had to. Maybe she assumed I'd keep drifting, like fog after a storm. All memory, no presence. I don't know. But when I walked through that front door, the house still smelled like rosemary and lemonwood polish. The kitchen island was covered in folders. Her laptop was open. Her phone face down, of course. She was in the sunroom, standing by the glass door, talking to someone on her earpiece. Probably Eli. Or someone who worked for the same ghost of a company he was now part of. She didn't hear me at first. Her voice was low, professional, but I caught the edges. Words like timeline, containment, and narrative structure. I didn't recognize the terms, but I recognized the tone. She wasn't just talking logistics. She was directing a script. I leaned against the wall and waited. She turned around mid-sentence, saw me, and her entire face locked into stillness. Like someone had unplugged her. Her jaw didn't drop. She didn't scream. Her eyes just narrowed. Slowly. The way a person looks when they think they're hallucinating a dead memory. I thought you left, she said, calm to calm. I said nothing. She pulled the earpiece out and walked into the kitchen, pouring herself water like this was a normal Thursday. You're not supposed to be here. I finally spoke. And yet here I am. She placed the glass down. No shaking hands. No apology. Just that hollow self-control she wore like armor. What do you want? It was the only question I was sure she'd ask. So I reached into my jacket and pulled out the receipt. The one with Marcy Quinn scribbled across it. I slid it across the counter like a playing card. She stared at it. You left this in St. Louis, I said. Sloppy. Her eyes didn't move. Her voice didn't crack. That's not mine. No, I agreed. It isn't. It's hers. Whose? I smiled. The woman you worked with. The one who met with Eli after you left. The one who gave him a flash drive. I saw them together. At the airport. Now her face changed. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp or a retreat. But with a tightening. Her eyelids flickered. Her mouth tensed. Like someone realizing a locked door was already open and wind was coming through. You're not going to like where this goes, she finally whispered. I already don't. She exhaled. A single, slow breath. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice. You need to understand something, Lowell. You were never the target. You were just close. And that made you inconvenient. That was it. That was the truth I hadn't known I was looking for. I wasn't the story. I was the noise around it. What is this really? I asked. Darla folded her arms. Her voice was almost mournful. It started as a cover. You were cover. Our marriage. My job. Even Eli. But when things shifted, we didn't adjust fast enough. You saw more than we planned for. And we is who? She hesitated, then said a name I'd never heard before. But when I'd hear again, on every document I'd uncover in the weeks to come, on contracts filed through shadow accounts, and on a quiet list sent to me anonymously 3 days later. The name wasn't Marcy. The name was Vera Hollis. And she was still watching me. Vera Hollis. That name followed me for weeks. Not loudly. Not with flashing headlines or scandalous emails. Just in whispers, in searches that turned up mostly nothing, scrubbed bios, ghosted websites, foundations with no faces, firms that didn't technically exist. But in the quiet places? In government bid databases. In legal loopholes. In dark web whispers. She was there. Always 2 steps outside the law. 1 step ahead of curiosity. And Darla had said the name like a confession. The moment I walked out of our house, that beautifully hollow place we once called home, I knew I wasn't going to fight them. Not directly. I wasn't going to send files to the press or show up at someone's doorstep with threats. I'd seen enough of their world to know that people like them didn't panic when you shouted. They panicked when you vanished with knowledge. So that's what I did. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not Ryan. Not friends. Not even my mother, who still thought Darla and I were figuring things out. I bought a one-way ticket under an old alias I used in college, cleared out the last of my accounts, and disappeared like a shadow during sunset. But I didn't run. I rebuilt. I settled in a small coastal town in Maine. Quiet. Foggy. The kind of place where people don't ask why you keep to yourself, where everyone knows each other's dog's name before their last name. I rented a tiny cottage near the harbor and got a job restoring antique boats, the kind of slow, honest work that stains your hands and calms your thoughts. And I healed. For the first few weeks, I'd wake up still expecting her voice. Still expecting the vibration of a phone lighting up with another lie. But it faded. Like noise you forget was playing until it's gone. And then, one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. No stamp. Inside, a note. You were smarter than we expected. You chose peace. That's rare. No one is watching anymore. You're free. No signature. Just those words. I burned the letter without hesitating. And I truly knew, I wasn't part of their story anymore. They had closed the file. I had become what they feared most, a man who walked away, not out of weakness, but with quiet power. Months passed. Then, seasons. Now, I wake up to salt in the air and wood beneath my fingers. I fish on Saturdays. I read. I smile more than I used to. And sometimes, when the wind picks up just right, I think about Darla. Not with hate. Not with pain. But with the calm that comes from knowing she never broke me. She just underestimated me. In a world full of people shouting for vengeance, I became the one who chose something quieter. Freedom. And that, I've learned, is the best kind of ending.